So this is Baruch Fleischman. This is the book Jewish Astrology, a Cosmic Science, Torah, Talmud, and Zohar works on spiritual astrology. So this person, Rabbi YAAKOV KRONENBERG, is not a rabbi, he's a tremendous scholar and Kabbalist, been into the depths of what's actually going on in this world, where we're sitting on a planet, standing on a planet, moving around on a planet which is actually moving. But we can't see the movement because relative to where we are, we don't see it. But doesn't mean that it's not moving. It's moving through space and it's turning at the same time. And everything that we have is circular. Circles within circles within circles. And so trying to plumb that, to really understand how it came out to be like that. That's really the work that Rabbi YAAKOV KRONENBERG is doing here. And he's opened up, to me, tremendous vistas. Let me see if I can bring us over to where we stopped in the last year. And here's a little bit more about, let me get some light on this, maybe I hope May. Yeah. So now, and coming back to where we are, Rabbi YAAKOV writes, you see now that the next three levels, so he's talking about the 5 different levels, and the fact that in Western and Eastern astrology, you only have 2 levels. So why do the Jews have 5? So he says, we are going to talk about which are the 3 levels, these 3 higher levels, which are connected with the Hebrew permutations, names, and letters. This cannot be understood to the non-Jewish world. They don't really have a YAAKOV. They have something else. And this is the reason astrologers, other than Jewish ones, don't talk about these levels, because, as we said, the 3rd level is already the level of the tribes of Israel. And so they're not concerned about the tribes of Israel. And we discuss the different ways of counting these tribes. There are 12 of them, and we discuss lots of different ways that this number 12 appears. And if we go according to the order of the tribes, which is based on chapter 2 in the book of Numbers, where the Torah talks about the camps in the desert, then we are talking about the order of the tribes as if it was from the point of view in which the tribes began. Because in the beginning of the book of Exodus, the tribes are listed according to the order of their mothers, which were the wives of Yaakov. Because Yaakov had 2 wives and 2 concubines, and the children of each one are listed in the beginning of the book of Exodus according to the order of their birth, more or less, and according to the order of the mothers, which one of them gave birth first. Who are the wives? Who are the concubines? So the order of the tribes there is according to the chronological order of their birth, with one exception. But they were not tribes yet. They were just children. They were just individual people. The Torah didn't really discuss them in the terms of tribes yet. But now when you move later into the book of Numbers, they are already discussed in terms of tribes and in terms of how many people were in each tribe at that time. So there it is already a matter of tribes. And so we talked about the tribes and about each of the characteristics which are connected to each tribe, as well as the flag of each tribe, and how we use the tribes in order to understand astrology better, and actually to use it as a key to the finding of the hidden wisdom in the Torah. That is done by using each of the tribes as an astrological symbol, and thus by understanding that each of them came from a different place in the upper worlds. Upper worlds meaning the light of God shining through letters and combinations. And then after that, we saw that there are 2 more levels, the 4th and the 5th. Now, what's going on with this, which are based on the names of God? First of these 2 levels is based on God's name Adnut, which is spelled Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, or A-D-N-Y. There's 4 letters, which contains the letters Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud. But we didn't really talk so much about that. But in general, I think it is connected more with the hours of the night. So that is not really what I wanted to get into here so much. So I wanted to get more into other names of God, which is connected to the most outer circle, which is called the name Havaya, and contains the letters Yud, K, Vav, and a second K. This can be considered the real name of God. Now, whatever that means. So he said, and it means that it's the pathway of reaching God. So and the order of the letters Yud follows Yud. Let's see Yud followed by a Hey, which is then followed by a Vav, and then another Hey. Is the standard way of spelling the name of God, and this order of letters in the name of God stands for the first month in the Jewish calendar, which is the month of Nisan, which is April, where everything is going going in a straight order, straight ahead. And then we went into all the other different permutations, and thus we have thus we have explained all the 12 permutations of God's name. And as we explained many times before, a 4-letter name could be permuted into 24 different ways, which is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which gets to 24. But since this name of God has 2 letters which are the same, so therefore we divided 24 by 2, and thus there are 12 permutations to this name of God we are talking about. And each month has a different permutation. And those permutations are the real key to understanding what kind of energy is coming down to the world in that particular time. So this is all time-bound too, I see. And I hanged a picture of those permutations here for you to see. So we have some drawings of that. For you to see that the sources of the energies are really not the planets or the stars. Energies really come from a higher power, which is the power of Hashem, power of God, power of infinity. And so we see the 12 permutations of his name, and since his name has 12 permutations, each of these 12 months has a different aspect of God directing the world. So each one of the 12 months has a different aspect which affects us. In other words, we can't really think about God or talk about him because God's really unknown, and really, I would add, unknowable. And you are not even allowed to really try and think about him. In the Kabbalah doesn't like you to really go beyond a certain level. Believe it or not, this is a fundamental principle. As far as you can help it, you are not allowed to even think about God. What is his essence? Because once you think about it, as if you made a place for him and you sort of like measured him out from outside of him. And he is everywhere. He is above everything. He is inside everything. And he consumes everything. So you can't really make a separation between you and him in the sense that you can investigate him. You can't do that. It's not possible. Not a thing. Which you obviously can't. It's just the sense of you thinking what is called in quotation marks God, that you are not allowed. You should regard God as something you can't even think about or really understand. This is how the Gaon of Vilna explained why it is particularly actually forbidden to even think about God, in the sense that you are kind of picturing him. That's what he means to say. Now, thinking about godliness or God, it is God's manifestation in the world. It's all we're talking about. But he means they're trying to confine God, as we see in another religion that's slightly related to ours. But what we are allowed to do, which is the highest we can get in Kabbalah, according to Kabbalists, is to learn the conduct of God, his ways, God's will, his direction, what he wants from us, so to speak. In other words, we are allowed to, and we should learn how he directs the world through the Torah, which is a special book he gave us. And through that, we can start understanding how God directs and runs the world. And this is the work of the Kabbalah, to try to understand how God made the world and put it together, how history operates, and how God directs and manages everything. This is the Kabbalah, and this is what it is about. So we'll learn a little bit more. And so we can look at these names, which are permutations of God's Havaya name. We see that each of these permutations is different from the other, as if they are different names. And we see how the way God directs the world in each month switches in the following month. This is due to the different permutations which are used for each month, the different order of the letters in the permutation which is connected to each month. And this indicates the different energies which come down in each month. And for example, you see in the different temperatures for each month, the climate changes. And you can see it in the growing of crops. You can't grow, every place, everything. The animal reproduction. For example, I used to raise goats. I lived on a farm and I had some goats. And the goats, actually, they mate in the fall and they give birth in the spring. When they give birth, they have milk. So you get the milk at that time. This happens every year the same way. The animal reproduction and all different sorts of things, you see that everything changes depending on what it is in the year. So we went into all of this. So we discussed a lot of things. And we saw how each of the permutations for the different months of the years works. And we have spent a lot of time on that. And I would like to add one more thing tonight regarding that. And if people remember, we already saw in the earlier lessons that there are 12 senses in the human being, which we have also connected to these 12 permutations of the Havaya name of God of the 12 tribes of Israel. We put all of these 12s together. We said that all the senses include that of speech, thought, action, sight, hearing, cohabitation, smell, sleep, anger, taste, laughter, walking or motion, things like that, all different qualities, all different senses. And we connected them with the 12 tribes of Israel, believe it or not. We connected each of those senses with each of the tribes. Each of the tribes is connected to one of those senses. As we saw in the book of Chesed LaAvraham, where it is mentioned that each tribe had a special quality, and which was better than all the other tribes. Of course, this is true of every human being too. And this was based on which of the senses were strong in each of the 12 tribes. But now I'd like to show you something which I don't remember whether I showed it to you previously or not. If I showed it to you last time, then I'm going to add on to it now. So just like those 12 characteristics are connected to the 12 tribes of Israel, we also see that all these senses are used in connection with the name of God and its permutations too. And again, don't think that God really has these senses in the same way that we understand them. Don't think that God thinks and smells or sees the same way we do, because this is not true, and God is above that. He's beyond any physical recognition at all. He gave us all, but he has a will. And he gave us all those abilities, which he has in a much higher way, in a much higher sense. And we are using it when we described God. In other words, we are attributing all those senses to him in order to figure and explain his actions, because we're the recipients. Let me see, I think I'm losing the place again. And he given all those abilities, which he has in a much higher way, in a much higher sense, and we are using it when we describe God. In other words, we are attributing all those senses to him, which means that we can come to a position where we can see how the flow of the light goes from him down to us and manifests itself in these senses, in order to figure and explain his actions in a way which would make sense to us according to our understanding. So, if we say that God sees, we mean that he directs things, but we don't mean that he sees as a person sees. He doesn't see with the visible body. With eyes. But in any case, all those actions or senses are also mentioned in connection with God's name, just as they are connected with the tribes. All of those actions or senses are whatever, they are connected with God's name. For example, whenever it is said, and God saw, or and God heard, and God smelled, or sniffed, and God spoke, his language is like a consuming fire, as God says, I had an intercourse, or intercourses with you, all the great nations of God, and God got angry. or was angered, and God walked. The only one who sits in heaven shall laugh, and God thought of destroying, or how when they went and to destroy, wake up. Why would you sleep, God? And other attributions of that kind. Now that's all coming from us down below, the recipients. So you see that all these attributions, those senses and actions are connected with God. So just because he's the manufacturer, so just like each of the 12 tribes of Israel is connected to one of those attributions, so are the 12 permutations of God's name connected to one of those attributions. So are the 12 permutations of God's name connected to it. So you really have to understand each month and how the energies come down from those permutations. Now, he really talked about this. Those permutations of God's name. So we see that all these senses are also attributed to God himself, and he himself already uses each of those senses, so to speak, and this is what connects each of these senses to each of the permutations of God's name. And for example, the permutations which laughs is connected to a tribe which laughs, and the permutation which walks is connected to a tribe which travels, which walks, or to be more accurate, which has the ability of walking or traveling. So we see how all of these different attributes come down from the names of God. They are already in the names of God. So if you really look in the Torah, or indeed in any place in the Bible, you see that there attributions of senses of God. So when you see a passage about the attributes of the actions of laughing to God, for example, and you know that it talks about the sense of laughing in such a deeper aspect. And the sense of laughter is connected to the constellation of Pisces. So whenever God is described as laughing, you know that the passage is talking about the aspect of Pisces. And so you can thus start learning more on how that sign works. And you also see how the tribes behave, but not only that, you also see, so to speak, how God behaves, how he deals with us. So you start connecting everything with the months and the tribes, etc. So in other words, you can start connecting each month with the tribe it's connected to and with the permutation that's connected to it, and then you could get deeper into astrology and also into the Bible. And thus you become able to learn the Bible on a secret level, on a mystical level. And in fact, there are two ways of learning the Bible mystically. One is the astrological way, and the other is Kabbalistic way. Because all the secrets of the Bible have been concealed in the Kabbalah and in astrology. And therefore, if you know Kabbalah and astrology, you can start to understand the Bible in a different way, in a much deeper level. So he says, so again, as we said in the chart, we have 12 permutations of God's name, the name of Avaya. We also ask where those 12 permutations come from. And we've learned that their source goes all the way back to the highest level of the world, which is called Atzilut, the world of Atzilut, which is called the parts of Eric Anpin, also known as the parts of Eric Anpin. In the mind of Eric Anpin, from the children, from the hidden mind of Eric Anpin, Eric Anpin is the basis of reality, but it is extremely, extremely non-physical. So, in other words, it's hidden deep within a tiny, tiny, tiny place that we don't know exists. And even more than that, we can see about the source of the 12 permutations of God's name. We can say that it goes back all the way to the hidden mind of the world of Adam Kadmon. Now, this is called Ak. Adam Kadmon was Adam Arishon. Now, this is a fact that very interesting to me. The first man in history, and this source of the mind of Adam Kadmon is in fact the first revelation. And more than that, so let me just go back to what's got me here. So he says, and we see that it goes back all the way to the hidden mind of the world of Adam HaKadmon, the very first man. Now, in Kabbalah, Adam Kadmon refers to a, let's say, I'll call it a wrapping or a film that covers over the line of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is totally ununderstandable and not reachable in any way at all. But the Adam Kadmon is a prototype of everything that follows. Now he says this Adam Kadmon, I don't know if he means it morphs into the first physical man, but it's basically the same, like I say, the same prototype. Because within each, the simple man, you or me, is also a wrapping. We are wrapping. We are a lavush, a clothing for the light of the Ein Sof, which is inside of us. So maybe it's similar. So the first man in history. But let's talk about the first man in history, where the Torah begins. So he says, in this source of the mind of this Adam Kadmon, that there is a primordial mind. There's only one mind, many bodies. Is in fact the first revelation. That is, that there is only one mind to the universe. And more than that, as we have said before, the whole world is run from there. Because out of the hidden mind comes the upper and lower minds. The Moach Elyon and the Moach Tachton, that's what they're called, and they are the upper and lower mazalot of the beard also. And they are really the ones which direct the world. In other words, the world is directed through those flows. The source of whatever was the way is directed is there. Whatever is going to come is directed from there. And so then he says, we're finishing up here now because this has been going a long way. He says, and all the forces come down from there. So we understand this concept of Adam Kadmon, which is the prototype of the human being, the template for everything that comes after. And by the time we see or feel it, all the energy had traveled through all that distance and through all the upper worlds before it gets to the planets and eventually to Earth. So again, in Kabbalah, the whole system and essence of praying is the idea of being able to go all the way up the ladder, to be able to understand the influences of the light of God permuted through the name of Hashem. So to the upper worlds and bring down the energy and use it properly. So I want to stop right here. This is Baruch Fleischman. It's been a long shir. This is a Tikkun Elevator Kollel.